Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So it's that time of month again, it's time for the reading wrap-up video, and I have some really good ones to talk about this month because I had 2 5-star reads this month, so I'm really excited to get started, so let's get into it. So I'm going to start off with one of my 5-star reads, An Academic Affair. I absolutely love this, obviously, or it wouldn't be a 5-star read for me, but I could not put this down. I stayed up all night reading this, and I have no regrets. So the story is a marriage of convenience between Sadie and Jonah, where they're in like the world of academia. Sadie gets a really good job that has a spouse hire clause in the contract, and so she decides to marry her work nemesis or rival or enemy, however you want to put it, so that he can also get a job and be able to take care of his sister who's recently gone through some personal issues. And so it's honestly, it's a beautifully written, true slow burn romance with amazingly sharp wit, and the tension is great. And the 2 characters' journey from rivals to friends to lovers really does feel authentic and real. And it also just has the right mix of banter, vulnerability, longing, and it's just absolutely perfect. Also, the side characters really do shine in this, and so I'm really excited to see what book comes next, because I do think there's going to be more books to this, because there's quite a few characters that I really enjoyed, and I would love to see if they have their own book and read more about them. Also, one of the things about this book that I absolutely loved it, but also like it really got me into annotating a little bit more of my books on my Kindle. Before, I do it occasionally here and there, and I really wanted to do it, but I never really got into doing it. But this book, I really was able to get into it, and like there were so many things I wanted to highlight, little footnotes I put in there. I also really liked how the author handled the different kind of writing styles between the 2 characters' point of view chapters that really helped really solidify their personalities. Like for example, Jonah is more of a traditional scholar, academic, and so his all have footnotes in them and everything, and it's all very analytical and everything like that, until near the end, as you can see, he gets less rigid in both his personality a little bit, but also in the way he writes. There's still footnotes, but they have more Sadie flair to them, which is really sweet to just really see how they're getting closer together throughout the length of the book. And the same thing with Sadie. She is a little more fun and bubbly. She does popular culture kind of fiction stuff, so her stuff's a little less rigid, and her chapters don't have any footnotes in them. She has more like pop culture references and uses more like slang terms and stuff in her writing, and she does get a little more, not analytical, but more, you can really see the Jonah rubbing off on her throughout the book, and it's a really nice little touch. Also, the side characters in this really do shine without overshining the main characters, which I really love. There's quite a few characters in here that I really hope get their own book, because I would love to not only read about them and their story, but also kind of catch up with Sadie and Jonah and see what they're doing later on. Hey, future Megan here. I was just editing and I decided to get outside and touch some grass and get some sun. Well, sort of. It was like about storm actually. Anyway, so I decided to come outside for a little bit, take a break. And there's actually a few things that I've been thinking about that I really wish I had said earlier that I want to just go ahead and add in. One of which is that I think one of the reasons why I resonated with this book so much was because of a lot of the problems the characters are having with academia are the problems my husband had back when he was working in academia. And another thing is I really wish that I could actually like quote directly from the book, but I can't since it's an arc. But there's an actual passage in the book where Jonah is saying something to Sadie, and I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, this is exactly word for word what my husband would have said to me in this exact same situation, and I highlighted all of it. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I love this book as much as I do, is because of their problems are problems I've actually seen my husband and other friends all go through, and so it's something I can kind of relate to. But on top of that, Jonah just sometimes reminds me of my husband. Like in small ways, like in that one little passage, it was like really my husband. Anyway, it's actually about the rain, so I'm probably gonna go back inside and finish editing. But I just wanted to say all that. So my next 5-star read was A Rose in Chains. So I did a listen along or read along with this video where I was listening to the audiobook while I worked on a sewing project called So Lit. It's a new series I'm trying out. So for the first video in that series, I have it linked above, and I'll have both of them linked down below, so you can check that out if you want a really in-depth read along and review of this book. But I'm just going ahead and give you like a gist of my overall review of the book. So Rose in Chains is a beautiful, brutal romantasy with themes on magical captivity, an enemies to lovers, sort of more of a bully romance, which I found out I don't really love, and then political unrest. It's an intense and at times emotionally heavy and bleak story, but overall the world building is impeccable and immersive, and you really feel like you're going through things with the main characters, and that is just a very rare and fun ride. There's been a lot of talk on this book about how it's connected to Harry Potter fan fiction and everything. So I can't say a whole lot about it because I've not actually read Harry Potter, but I have read a lot of Harry Potter fan fiction, and I have seen the movies. And I really do feel like the story stands on its own. I do think the magical system, from what I understand from the movies and fan fiction that I've read, it seems very different from how the magic system works in Harry Potter. But don't take my word for it because, like I said, I've not read Harry Potter. But in A Rose and Chains, the main female character is fierce and complicated and very three-dimensional, not two-dimensional at all, like a lot of fan fiction usually is. And then her dynamic with Tobin, who is the main male character, is interesting and complicated and messy in the best way possible. The tone of the book is definitely dark and bleak and emotionally heavy. So this is not something I recommend you try and binge read in one night or anything like that, because that would be a bit much, for me personally anyway. You might be able to handle it, but for me that would have been a little too much. However, the story is rich and it's layered, and the side characters also really do come through in this as well, and they're not just background material or something there to fill out the background. Like, they are actually fleshed out characters as well in their own right. But obviously, I listened to the audio version of this. I got the ARC of the audiobook from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. And I really think that the narrators for this one did a really good job. I think their performance really added an extra layer of tension to the story. Next is Loving a Vampire's Total Chaos. So going from something heavy to something a little more fun. This is a story about a vampire who honestly is super chaotic and unhinged, and he instantly falls in love with a cop trying to solve the murders that he is committing. And so she's trying to catch the killer, and she doesn't know that it's the vampire who she is falling in love with. It's a really fun time. So this book is one of those good examples of social media marketing done well, because I found out about this book from the author posting about it constantly on Instagram and everything, and everything she was posting just made it seem more and more like, oh, this is definitely my cup of tea. I really need to try this out, and I am so glad I did, because I absolutely love this. It's just a quick, fun, chaotic vampire rom-com that doesn't take itself too seriously, which just made it even more fun. My favorite part of this book was obviously Xavier, who is the main male character and the vampire. He is truly unhinged. Like, not just like, oh, I'm a little wacky, look at me being silly. No, like a little unhinged. It made his chapters and his internal dialogue really interesting and fun to read, and also think about, oh, how's he going to react to this? Because you honestly did not know how he's going to react to things. Celine's chapters were not as fun or as interesting or whatever. However, because I was so excited to see how Xavier would handle things, a lot of things that were happening in her chapters, like, oh, it'd be fun to see how he reacts to this later on. However, even though I did really prefer his point of view chapters, I do think that Celine's were a good balance to keep the story from going a little off the rails. And once again, this is another example of the banter being perfect between the two main characters. So this one also had some good side characters as well. Not quite as many as the other two books I've mentioned. However, they did have a few, and I do think that the author for this book has already announced that the next book in the series is going to be based off Celine's best friend in this one, but I'm not sure. Either way, I'm excited to read it. So the next one is Battle of the Bookstores, and this one really is a love letter to book lovers everywhere, and loved it for it. I'm a sucker for any book that's like about authors or about bookstores and libraries and things like that. So the fact that it had two main characters set in different rival bookstores really just had me instantly add this to my TBR, and I'm so happy I did. So this one had two rival bookstores, as I mentioned, secret identities, and some cute banter between the two main characters. It really felt like a modern redo of You've Got Mail in some ways, in a lot of ways actually. And that's one of my favorite rom-coms ever, so absolutely love that. So the thing that kind of knocked it down from 5 stars for me and down to 4 was Josie's chapters, mostly. Her chapters got kind of repetitive because she didn't go to college and she's pretty insecure about it. And that just came up so much, too much in her chapters at times, where it just almost became a personality trait because of how much it came up and how much she dwelled on it and whined about it. It got to be a bit much sometimes. I also felt like the story dragged on a little bit in some spots, but wasn't overall too bad. However, the book still had a nice, fun Hallmark touch, reminded me of classic Meg Ryan rom-coms, and had some real emotional depth that overall made up for some of the pitfalls of Josie's insecurities and some of the pacing issues. Next is Puck and Prejudice. So I'm gonna just start with this part with, I think I love this as much as I did because I read this, or read bulk of it, after reading and listening to A Rose in Chains and another really dark, bleak romantasy. So I was in desperate need of something cutesy, fun, lighthearted, and guaranteed happy ending. And so I'm not sure if I would rate this one as high if I wasn't coming off the low, or the emotional low of everything that's so bleak in those other two books that I read right before. I'm not sure. However, it was really fun and just what I needed at that time. So it's unserious in the best way possible, in that a hockey player ends up in a freezing lake one night in the UK when he's visiting his sister, and ends up in 1812 and is found by the main female character, Lizzie, whose goal at the time is to become a widow, because in her time that gives her more freedom and she doesn't really want to be married. So she thinks finding Tuck, the main male character, is the perfect solution to her problems. She can marry him, help him get back to his time, and she can enjoy the widow status in her time without having to wait for her husband to unalive. But it's campy, charming, a little romantic, and just the right level of lighthearted fun that I needed at the time. There's a few little things. I did wish that we got a little more backstory on Tuck, because at times I honestly forgot that he was an athlete. So this being, with Puck in the name and him being in his hockey gear on the cover and it being marketed as a hockey romance, that felt a little odd that I could possibly forget that he was a hockey player. And I'm also still a little torn on the ending. I'm not sure if I like how everything was resolved or not. I'll be thinking about it, and one minute I'm like, oh yeah, that ending is good, that ending makes sense or whatever. And other times I'm thinking about it, it's like, no, that was not a good ending. I don't know. It's very weird for me how I feel about this ending. But the ending aside and all the other things aside, I really did enjoy this, and it was a really fun read and exactly what I needed at the time, as I've said already multiple times. Next is The Only Purple House in Town. So I got this book because I read another book from this author, this one right here, and I absolutely loved it. And then when I finished this one, I went ahead and gone to my library's website and requested every book from her I could find. So the story is about the main female character who inherits a house, and she turns it into a boarding house for extra money and everything on the side. And most of the story revolves around her and the wacky shenanigans her and her tenants get into, and the main male character who ends up staying at the boarding house. So there is like a touch of magical realism. So there are magical beings that can turn into shapeshift into animals and everything, and the main male character is one of those beings. I did really like how the magical realism was kind of threaded through the story and the world nicely. However, I do wish there was a little more explanation sometimes here and there on how the magical system works and everything like that. But overall, it wasn't too confusing or anything where I couldn't pick up pieces here and there. So it wasn't a huge detriment. However, because of the story revolved around the main female character and the tenants and everything at the boarding house, sometimes the romance between the two main characters really felt more like a subplot than the actual plot of the book, which is okay, but not what I really signed up for. However, the third act breakup was infuriating, annoying, unnecessary. I don't know why authors keep doing that. I don't understand why. With everything else going on in the book, it did not need the extra tension and the, story of the third act breakup to add anything to the story. It just felt like she wanted to tick off a box on her list of tropes she needed to get through, and one of them was third act breakup for some reason. So I really did not like the third act breakup. That's why this one did not get as high stars as it could have. However, I still really overall enjoyed this, and I think anyone who likes nice cozy fantasy will also really enjoy this as well. I do have a video coming up where I'll be reading a bunch of my library books and doing like a read along, and this will be one of the main books in that video. So definitely subscribe so you see when that comes out. Next is Cesar Romero, The Joker is Wild. So I picked this one up only because it was part of the selection for the summer camp reading thing that NetGalley was doing. So otherwise I wouldn't have picked this up because I don't really know much about him, and then also, I'm not a really big biographies or memoirs person. However, I do really love Batman, so that's why I went ahead and got this one. However, I mention all that so you know to take my review of this a little bit with a grain of salt, just simply because this is not my normal genre that I would normally read, and otherwise I wouldn't have picked this up if I didn't really want that badge on my profile. It's clearly really well researched, and the author's admiration for Caesar really does shine through. There really were some fun Hollywood anecdotes and moments, especially for those who are fans of some classic stars like Joan Crawford and other people from that era. And it was really cool learning about his Joker era because, like I said, I really am a big fan of Batman. And I do have a lot of fun childhood memories of watching that series and those early movies and everything with my dad as a kid. So it was really fun to read about those same things, those same memories, but from the other side. But at times it did kind of feel a little unfocused. There were a lot of plot summaries from his other projects and repeated speculation about his personal life, which started to kind of overshadow his actual life story. So the next is A Problematic Summer Romance. So I'm gonna be honest with you, I almost DNF'd this one several times because honestly, it just felt like the story was going around in circles because of the main male character, Connor, just kept being like, oh, she's too young for me, she's too young for me. I'm so old, you're not that old. She's not that young, but whatever. And like, honestly, all of the older characters in the book really, and I can't pronounce the word very well, made it out to where she was like a small child when really she was an adult with a job and higher education. Like the way they talked about her, you would think she was like 15. It was so annoying. Like honestly, if my brother talked to me that way, if I had an older brother and he talked to me that way, I'd be infuriated. Because the way every character talked to her was, it really got on my nerves. Like I understand that when you have a younger sibling, they feel younger than they actually are because of, you know, you're older and everything like that, just sibling dynamics and stuff. But this felt more than that. This felt like the author was trying to make this age gap romance taboo more than it really was by making the main female character seem younger than she was to actually make this taboo an actual taboo when really it wasn't. And honestly, sometimes I found myself kind of just bored because once again, like I said, everything was just going around in circles. This kind of reminded me a lot of Deep End, another one of Ali Hazelwood's books, where the whole marketing strategy about it was, oh look, it's so taboo, it's oh risky and all that kind of stuff, but when you actually read the book, it's like the safest version possible of the taboo that it was being publicized for. I wish we saw more of their actual building relationship instead of all the self-sabotaging and the spiraling about the age gap problems. Because yes, there is a big age gap. I think there's like 15 years or something. However, like I said, she's an adult. She's old enough to have higher education and she's one of the leading scientists in her field at the time, or becoming it anyway. So she's like in her late 20s, I guess. And so honestly, that's getting around the age where that big of an age gap is not that big of a deal. Like it's a deal, but not a big deal. Not as big of a deal as they were making out to be. And with that in mind, it really does make them, the way they all talk to her, even weirder. Where they really, like I said, they talk to her like she's a child. And it really, the way it's handled really does make it seem as if that was just the authors trying to make the main female character seem younger and more childish, just so that the age gap would seem like an issue when really it's not. However, the best thing about this book was the main characters from the previous book. Now, the previous book I didn't really like either. I honestly don't know why I went ahead and picked this one up because I didn't like the first one very much. However, my main problems with the first book was I really didn't like the main characters from it. However, I actually kind of liked them a little bit more in this book than in their own book. Though I was still really annoyed with how they treated the main character, how they treated Maya in this book, where they're like talking to her like she's a baby or something. So annoying. So that's all the books I read in July. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, and also comment down below any of the books that you've read in July that you want to talk about, because I love talking about books. So definitely comment down below anything that you read that you really enjoyed or you didn't really enjoy, or how you feel about any of the books that I read this month. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye!